A year ago at VUU, we commemorated the Christian holiday of All Souls, remembering our loved ones who had died recently and long ago. We processed solemnly to the front of the sanctuary, placed photographs and mementos of relatives and friends on a beautifully decorated table. I wept quietly, grieving my parents who had died the year before. At the end of that service, Randall, Casillas, and I turned to each other and in almost one voice said, "That was lovely." But we compared notes on the ofrendas we were making at home. Ofrenda and altar, we're using those words alternately. And we remembered sharing customs of Dia de los Muertos at VUU when our kids were growing up in this congregation. They're all 30-something now. We should talk to Andy about next year, we agreed. And of course, why don't you turned as it should into why don't we? And so here we are. However, Andy's consent that we go ahead with Dia de los Muertos service came with a caveat. His work with Puente and other groups in the years since Arizona passed SB 1070, and his deep understanding of how easy it is for mostly white, middle and upper class folks like us to misappropriate customs we only vaguely understand led him to urge caution. I was a bit uneasy too. I'm concerned that by picking and choosing what parts of the celebration speak to us, and by recreating those elements in our own ways, we're in danger of denigrating the people and cultures for whom they have deep, underlying meanings. Not on purpose, certainly, but by way of an attitude of privilege, a lazy, what's yours is mine since I mean well kind of an attitude. I could ease my unease, I thought, by claiming my husband Frank's family roots. His grandparents were all born in Mexico, after all. Except his family never celebrated Dia de los Muertos. Nah. And I found lately that it's much more of a southern Mexico custom than northern. Instead, I did what all good UUs do. I researched the topic to death. I read about traditions and followed the lead of friends like Janie Marquez and Randall. I dug back in my teaching files and remembered sharing stories with students back in the good old days when Arizona's middle school curriculum allowed, even encouraged, time to explore cultures and customs beyond what would be on the test. And then, voila! In the interim between last year's service and today's, Disney came to the rescue with the animated movie Coco. How many of you have seen Coco? I'm glad so many have. If not, I urge you to do so. The Chalice Singers will be singing its theme song, Remember Me, later in the service. Please understand, though, that Disney is not a cultural savior. It's just this time, with this movie, and with some deep prodding from those people they were in danger of shallowly trying to represent, they seem to have gotten it right. At a recent viewing of Coco, sponsored by ASU's Center for the Study of Race and Democracy, a panel of Latinx educators and journalists spoke of how deeply skeptical they had been when plans for Coco were announced. One participated in street protests in Los Angeles over Disney's short-lived idea to patent the phrase Dia de los Muertos. Yes, they considered that. The protests were led by cartoonist Lalo Alcaraz, who's the creator of a cartoon called La Cucaracha, which is, I think they're going to put it up on the screen. It's on that one, but not that one. Anyway, there it is. Okay. So this is not Dia de los Muertos, it's Cinco de Mayo. But the men sitting at the table say, the historic Mexican holiday of Cinco de Mayo has become a big part of American culture. Hi, I'm Sean. I'm the new official Cinco de Mayo mascot. Let's do shots. Let's build the wall. And yet, despite the panelists' skepticism, all three and everyone in the audience who spoke after the film agreed that they loved it, that it made them laugh and cry and remember their grandmother's chanclas, the shoes. I reached out to one of the panelists, journalist Nubia Enriquez, and asked what she thought of our plans for this service. Here's a part of her answer. Quote, I think the fact that your minister is conscious and aware of the importance of not engaging in cultural appropriation is awesome, especially because you have the intention of making this matter central to your celebration. Kudos to you. She continued, these traditions are sacred to those who have been practicing them for hundreds of years, so it's very important to be sensitive to that. Unfortunately, it's become a commercialized holiday in the U.S., and that is all sorts of problematic, but there's nothing we can do about that. The best you can do is to introduce people to this celebration in the most authentic and accurate way possible. Dia de los Muertos for us, whatever part of Mexico we're from, excuse me, is about honoring the dead and paying our respects to them collectively. I think that's something people can get on board with and maybe even build their own traditions around. Coming from a place of humility and respect, we'll always have you covered, and it seems like you guys are coming from that place, unquote. These are my takeaways from Coco. Death is a part of life that bears speaking about out loud. When no one tells the stories anymore is when a person is truly dead. By telling and retelling stories, especially the happy and funny ones, we keep our loved ones alive, not just in our own hearts and memories, but also for those who weren't born in time to meet them. My home ofrenda this year will include pictures of Frank's mom, Lydia Mayoral Quijada, and she's up here on this altar too. My mother-in-law was not an especially tactful person. She wondered out loud why I never got my nails manicured. She had the most beautiful long fingernails. She told me when she loved a meal I'd prepare and how badly I'd gone wrong when I tried to make her favorite split pea soup. We liked to window shop together at the meat counter at Food City. Her eyes twinkled when her sons called her Lid. When our home was burglarized, she sent my sisters-in-law out to buy me replacement jewelry, reminding them I wore silver, not gold. Lydia died 5 years ago, on my birthday. Mariachis played at her funeral and at the party celebrating her life after the funeral, and everyone said, Lydia should be here. She would love this. I loved her.
Good morning. I'm Randall Casillas. Ofrenda is the altar, but the word also means offering, probably the one made for the souls of the dead. Okay. First, a little background on the Days of the Dead in Mexico. They start on October 31st, when the altar is put up, and end on November 2nd, All Souls Day. People spend a lot of time preparing for the holiday, cleaning and straightening up the graves of their relatives and ancestors, putting up ofrendas, preparing food, and buying supplies needed for the holiday. On November 1st, the spirits of the children arrive. It is called El Día de los Inocentes, or El Día de los Angelitos. On November 2nd, the spirits of the adults arrive, called El Día de los Muertos. On November 2nd, everyone goes to the graveyard to welcome our returning souls, where they are prayed for, fed, where people tell stories about them, and where they are serenaded. People build altars in the cemeteries, but also in their homes. Okay, there are masses on November 2nd. Okay. Ofrendas can be dedicated to a single person who passed away in the previous calendar year, or to someone who we just want to remember. It can also be dedicated to one's ancestors. Okay, it all depends upon the person who puts up the altar. I'm sure many of you know about ofrendas, and maybe some of you even do an ofrenda yourself. Okay, on our altar we have included many traditional and some not so traditional items. Okay, candles we put up on just about every ofrenda there is. Okay, they will represent the element of fire. Okay, and guide the spirits of the altar so it can find its way home. Water, which represents purity, okay, is necessary on every ofrenda, according to Yara Simon, a writer on Mexican culture. It quenches the spirit's thirst. If the altar is dedicated to a specific person, there can be other drinks on the altar as well. depending upon what that person drank in life. So it could be anything from horchata or hot chocolate to maybe a shot of tequila. Just depends upon the person, right? Okay. Elements of earth are also on the ofrendas, okay, especially marigolds, as you see back here, okay, which are called cempasúchiles in Nahuatl, okay, which are called the flowers of death in Mexico. They are especially effective because they have their very strong aroma and their bright color, which again attracts the spirits to the ofrendas. Okay. Also, there are also other products of the earth that are on the ofrendas, like dulce de calabaza, a sweet pumpkin dish, tamales, empanadas, chicken mole, which are all very traditional Mexican dishes. Okay. I also put on more mundane earth products on my ofrenda, such as corn, apples, just normal produce of the fall. Okay. Our bread delicacy that is almost on all ofrendas is pan de muerto. You see one over here. We also have one back there. Okay. And it's a sweetened bread decorated with a skull and crossbones. Okay. Again, reminds us of our mortality, correct? Okay. Every altar will have also papel picado decorating it. The papel represents the wind or the element of air. Okay. Because of its ability to move. Okay. Even the color of the papel is symbolic. Okay. The color yellow represents life. The color purple represents death, okay, and orange is the union between life and death. Okay, I didn't know this. I just found that out. Very interesting to me. Okay, again, the colors accompanied by the breeze guide the spirits to the altar. Okay, although the Day of the Dead helps us to remember and kind of be sad because our relatives have passed. Okay, another part makes fun of our fear of death. Okay, but remember, death and life are part of a cycle, correct? So we have to remember that. Okay. That is why we see smiling calaveras, okay, or skulls, okay, on these ofrendas, okay? And of course, the skulls go back to Aztec culture, okay? But they're made very popular by a Mexican artist called Jose Guadalupe Posada, okay, who used calaveras he dressed them in the early 20th century, and he used them to satirize upper-class Mexican society around the Mexican Revolutionary time, okay? Since then, the figure of La Catrina, an upper-class matron, kind of dressed in, I'd say, almost Victorian, with a Victorian hat and everything, okay, is made popular. You'll see her all over the place, especially in Mexico, okay? On our ofrendas, you see a few calaveras, okay, with names, some of them with names written on the back of them, okay? We also have little nichos, which are little scenes of ofrendas. There's one up here dedicated to Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. One making fun of Diego as a sapo, a toad, because he was kind of toad. He looked kind of like a toad. Okay, so making fun of that, and one looking like a tombstone. Okay. I also, on my ofrendas, I always put the Virgin of Guadalupe because she was the patron saint of Mexico. And no Mexican is going to have, or Mexican American is going to have an ofrenda without the Virgin of Guadalupe. I mean, that is just it, okay? In addition, I put noisemakers on my ofrendas because, again, and it's usually in Mexico, they would put like a clay whistle. I lost my clay whistle, so I put on a maraca. I also put on some other things just for sound, again, to attract the spirit to the ofrenda. I guess I put on a rain stick too. Okay. If I were to dedicate the ofrendas to a single person, of course, the most important thing is to have pictures of the people that you want to dedicate your ofrenda to. Okay. But of course, if you don't have pictures, you can also put memories of something that belonged to that person on your ofrenda. Okay. So it could be whatever, something that they possess, something that they loved. You put on your ofrenda. Okay. Also, food we put on the ofrenda if it is dedicated to a specific person, his or her favorite food. So when I die, I want them. My favorite food is chicken enchiladas. I want chicken enchiladas on my ofrenda. Okay, so I'm going to write it in my living will. You know, this is what I want on my ofrenda. Okay, get it? Okay, so this is what I'm going to tell my family. Okay. Okay, lastly, in Mexico, they burn an incense called copal, and I'm sure many of you smelled it. It's a very strong scent, but we decided not to burn it here because we didn't want you all running out. Okay, all right, so that's what they would have in Mexico. It's from a tree. It's very strong. Okay, an American tradition, and this is something we would never do in Mexico. I have jack-o'-lanterns, and I put a lit jack-o'-lantern on my ofrenda. I'm in the United States. I would put something American on my ofrenda, okay, just to give it a little color. Again, something you would never do in Mexico, okay. You can customize your own ofrenda, but the idea here is to remember your loved ones, okay, tell stories about your loved ones, feel closer to them, and mourn them, okay, and that is the essence of the Days of the Dead.
In this last part of the service, which we're calling Building Connections, we'd like to consider how we relate to Hispanic, Latinx people and culture right here in the so-called Valley of the Sun, El Valle del Sol. How comfortable or uncomfortable are you in the presence of people speaking Spanish when you do not understand what they are saying? Do you assume when someone has a Spanish last name that they speak Spanish? Randall does. I don't. How likely are you to talk to people who don't look like you when you attend an event based on Mexican culture? Or right here at VUU? How can we all be both curious and respectful? This poem is from a book my middle school students loved called Cool Salsa, Bilingual Poems on Growing Up Latino in the U.S. Dia de los Muertos by Abelardo Delgado. Renancen los huertos, también los muertos. El Día de los Muertos, por 7 minutos podemos platicar con los seres queridos fallecidos. I remember tagging along, chasing my abuela to El Camposanto to sell paper flowers to make somber tombs bright. That was back in Mexico. I was only 7 years old. Here in the U.S., Los Muertos are personas non gratas. Here we do not wish to hold dialogue with Los Muertos. They remind us we too will eventually join them. Here there is no luto, there are no novenos, no punos de tierra. Here in the U.S., the idea is to hide, to ignore the dead, and even to avoid death in our conversations. In Mexico, la muerte is well known. She's la talaca, a feminine figure. Our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters call her la flaca. Talking with the dead is necessary to remind ourselves to enjoy our lives and not to go about as if we had already died and no one said goodbye or cared. There are a multitude of opportunities for you to explore Dia de los Muertos around the valley and beyond this afternoon, next week, and next weekend. Out on the patio after the service, we have lists of these events for you to take with you. They're in a basket with some little flowers, and we've had refreshments. I hope you got some, including chicharrones, not for vegetarians, pan dulce, and horchata. And of course, we encourage you to build an ofrenda in your home, to invite the spirits of your loved ones to visit and to tell their stories.